I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew my wife, Lisa, better than anyone. We've been married for 10 years, and for most of that time, things seemed pretty solid. She was the kind of woman who could be bitchy, but she was also charming in her own way, and I always believed she kept her loyalty. We had our fights, mostly about little things, but nothing that suggested she was capable of cheating. Or so I thought. It all started subtly. Lisa had been acting a bit different lately, more irritable after church, more secretive about her phone, and she was spending a lot of time at the church with the choir director, Mark. Honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. I figured she was just passionate about her church work. She's always been involved in the choir, and Mark is a good-looking guy, charismatic, a bit flirty, but I never really paid attention. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. But then, things shifted. She started canceling date nights, claiming she had choir practice or some church meeting. She would get defensive when I asked about Mark, brushing me off with a laugh or a snarky comment like, "You're just jealous because I sing better than you." That was her way of dismissing my concerns, trying to make me seem paranoid. I remember asking her outright if there was something going on, and she rolled her eyes, calling me insecure, saying I was imagining things. Still, I couldn't shake this feeling that something wasn't right. I'd catch her sneaking her phone into the bathroom or locking it when I was around. She'd get defensive every time I brought up her attitude. Then one day I noticed her acting even more strangely. She was nervous when she came home after church, and she kept changing clothes quickly, hiding her phone when she saw me look at it. I started to suspect she was hiding something, but I didn't have concrete proof yet. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I was at home, just sitting in the living room, scrolling through my own stuff, when I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. I looked up and saw her hurriedly stuffing her phone into her purse. Something about the way she reacted, her face blanched, her eyes darted away, made me suspicious. I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know probably wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know what she was hiding, and what I found was shocking. There was a string of messages between her and Mark, mostly flirty stuff, but it was obvious they'd crossed the line. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one said. "You're so good in church, but I bet you're even better in bed," another. The worst part. She'd been lying about where she was after church, claiming she stayed late to help with choir cleanup, but she'd actually been sneaking off with Mark to some hotel or apartment nearby. I couldn't believe it. All those times she told me she loved me, that I was the only one, and she was sleeping with him. Finding that evidence was a punch in the gut. I felt this rage and betrayal I'd never experienced before. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I had to plan how to do it right. I was furious but also heartbroken. My wife, the woman I trusted, was out there cheating on me with someone I'd always thought of as just a choir director, a good guy maybe, but not someone capable of this kind of betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept staring at the phone, trying to process what I'd discovered, trying to piece together how I'd let myself get here. I felt stupid, angry, and utterly lost. If she thought she could lie her way out of it, she was dead wrong. I decided I'd need to be smart about this, but I also knew I couldn't just sweep it under the rug. I had to face her, find out exactly what her excuses would be, and figure out what I was going to do next. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind was racing. Part of me still couldn't believe what I'd found, and another part was furious. I knew I couldn't just confront her without some kind of plan. I needed to get her to admit something, or at least to break down and tell me what I already knew. I spent the day trying to stay calm, pretending everything was normal while plotting my next move. Lisa came home from church, looking especially chipper. I could tell she was trying to act normal, but her eyes kept darting around like she was paranoid someone might find out her secret. She kept making snide comments about work, about how people at church are so nosy, and how Mark's just a friend. The way she said it, she sounded defensive, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I just kept quiet, waiting for her to slip up. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted her to feel like she was winning while I was silently planning my attack. I knew I had to confront her at some point. I couldn't keep living with the lie. But I also wanted to catch her off guard, to see how she'd react when pressed. I decided I'd go for a direct approach, but I'd do it when I had some leverage. So I waited until that evening when she was supposed to be relaxing after dinner. When she finally sat down on the couch, I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eyes. "Lisa, I need to talk to you about something serious." She rolled her eyes already, annoyed, and said, "What now? I don't have time for your stupid accusations." That was typical. She was always quick with the lies, the dismissals. I decided to push a little more. "Look, I know about Mark," I said softly but firmly. Her face instantly changed. She looked shocked, then angry. "What are you talking about? You're crazy. You've been paranoid since day one." I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages, her flirty texts, the hotel receipts I'd found in her purse. Her eyes widened and her face went pale for a moment. Then she sneered and said, "That's none of your business. You're just being jealous because I'm better than you in bed." I couldn't believe how she spun it. She was denying everything, even as I had proof right in front of her face. I felt my stomach turn. I was furious, but I stayed calm. I wanted her to realize that I knew exactly what she'd been doing. I told her I'd been watching her for weeks, that I'd seen her sneaking around, and that I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. Her reaction was classic Lisa, bitchy, dismissive, and full of lies. She started crying, claiming she was under a lot of stress, that Mark was just someone she talked to at church, and that I was crazy to think she'd cheat. But her voice cracked and I could tell she was lying through her teeth. She kept insisting I was imagining things, that I was insecure, that I had trust issues. But I didn't buy it. I saw her for what she was, a selfish, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with anything. The emotional impact hit me hard. It was like my entire world was crashing down. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and hurt. How had it come to this? How had I missed all the signs? I'd always thought of her as my partner, my wife, the woman I'd trusted with my life. And now I realized she'd been hiding this affair right under my nose. I kept telling myself I should feel angry, and I did. Anger at her, anger at Mark, anger at myself for not seeing it sooner. But beneath it all, there was just this deep ache of sadness. I'd lost the woman I loved, and I didn't know how to fix it, or even if I wanted to. I sat there, staring at her as she continued to deny everything, trying to come up with some clever excuse, some way to spin it. But I wasn't buying what she was selling anymore. I knew I had to face the reality that my marriage was over, or at least on the brink of it. The question was what to do next. I was so filled with conflicting feelings, the desire for revenge, the heartbreak, the confusion, and I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her get away with this without a fight. Whatever came next, I had to decide whether I was going to fight to save what was left or just walk away. After that confrontation, the house felt colder. Lisa kept trying to act innocent, throwing out more lies, saying she'd only been talking to Mark as part of her church duties, that it was just innocent flirtation, nothing more. She even threw in the classic line, "You don't understand how stressful I've been. Church stuff, work, the kids, maybe I needed someone to talk to." Yeah, right. I had heard enough. The truth was staring me in the face. She'd been cheating on me behind my back, and she wasn't even sorry. I spent the next couple of days trying to process everything, but inside, I knew I had to do something more than just feel sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wanted to make her pay in some way. I started thinking about how she'd always been so bitchy, so manipulative, and how she loved to lie her way out of everything. Now I saw her in a new light, selfish, deceptive, and pretty much a master at playing the victim. But I also knew I had to be careful. If I was going to expose her, I needed solid proof. I decided I'd set up a trap. I went to the church the next day, pretending to drop off some paperwork. I knew Mark was supposed to be there for choir rehearsal, and I wanted to see if I could catch her with him again. I wasn't exactly hopeful, but I figured if I could get some video or audio evidence, I could really put an end to her lies. I knew the church had security cameras installed, supposedly for safety, but I had a feeling they might have captured something more than just people walking in and out. I waited outside the choir room, hiding behind a pillar. I kept my phone ready, trying to be discreet. Minutes felt like hours, but then I saw her sneaking out of the side entrance with Mark. They looked tense, hurried, like they knew they were doing something wrong. I managed to get a good shot of them walking together, her with her head down, him whispering something in her ear. Then just as they were about to get into his car, I snapped a quick photo. My heart was pounding. This was it. I had proof now, real proof. That night I went back home and watched the footage over and over. I couldn't believe I'd actually caught her in the act. That's when it hit me. I had what I needed. I was going to confront her again, but this time, with everything laid out on the table, I knew I had to be strategic. I didn't want her to spin her lies or play the victim anymore. I wanted her to see that I wasn't some fool she could manipulate. The next evening I called her into the living room. She looked a little nervous but tried to act like everything was fine. I pulled out the phone and played the footage. Her face drained of color as she watched herself sneaking out with Mark. She stammered, trying to deny it, but I cut her off. "Lisa, I've seen enough. I've got video evidence of you sneaking out with Mark after church. You lied about everything, about the stress, about being faithful. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you?" She looked furious now, her bitchy attitude bubbling to the surface. "Don't you dare accuse me of anything I didn't do," she spat. "You're just jealous. Mark's a good man and I was just talking to him. You're imagining things, everything was innocent." Innocent. Yeah, right, I wanted to scream, but I kept my cool. I'd heard enough lies. I told her that I was done trusting her, that she was a liar and a cheat, and that I didn't want to be married to someone who could do this to me. I told her I'd been humiliated enough, and I needed some time to think. Her reaction was priceless. She tried to guilt-trip me, crying, saying I was overreacting, that I was just insecure. But I saw her for what she was, a manipulative bitch who thought she could do whatever she wanted and get away with it. That's when the emotional pain really sank in. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious, all at once. I'd always believed in loyalty and honesty, and now all of that was shattered. I realized I'd been a fool for trusting her so blindly. But more than anything, I knew I had to take control of the situation. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I had proof, and I was going to use it. Whether I stayed or left, I needed to reclaim my dignity and figure out what my next move was going to be. I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk away for good, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The game was over. After I showed her the footage, Lisa's face twisted with rage and disbelief. She tried to maintain her bitchy facade, but I could see the cracks forming. She was furious that I caught her, but honestly I didn't care anymore. All her lies, all her manipulations, they'd crumbled in just a few minutes. She spat out, "You're just trying to ruin me. Mark's just a friend. You don't have proof of anything else." That was her go-to, deny everything, deflect, accuse me of being paranoid. I stared at her, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and deep heartbreak. Deep down, I wanted to smash something, anything, to release this pent-up rage. But I kept my composure. I told her, "You've been lying to me for months. I found your messages, your hotel receipts, and now this footage. How much more do I need before you finally admit what you've done?" She looked like she was about to cry, but that bitchy attitude was still lurking beneath her eyes. She was trying to flip the script, accusing me of making it all up or planting evidence. I didn't bother engaging her further. I told her that I'd need some time to think, to process what she'd done. I didn't tell her I was planning to take everything. Her actions had already made it clear she didn't deserve my trust anymore. I'd been so blind, so naive, but now I wasn't going to let her manipulate me further. I knew I had to make a decision. I felt broken, betrayed, and furious, but I also knew I couldn't just break down. I had to keep my head clear and figure out what was best for me. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the cheating, her sneaky attitude. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for thinking she'd never do something so vile. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her sneaking out with Mark, her bitchy smirk, her defiant eyes. I started questioning everything about our marriage, about the woman I'd loved. How could someone who seemed so charming and loving turn out to be capable of such deception? I guess I'd missed the signs. Or maybe I just refused to see them. In the days that followed, I kept my distance. I didn't want to be around her, didn't want to hear her pathetic excuses or see her act like she was the victim. I was angry at her, but I was also heartbroken. I'd built my entire life around her, and now I felt like I was standing in the ruins of what I thought was a happy marriage. Honestly, part of me wanted to lash out to make her regret everything she'd done, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I decided I'd need to get legal advice, start figuring out my options. I wasn't about to let her manipulate or guilt trip me into staying. As I sat there, contemplating my next move, I realized I'd gone from feeling naive and trusting to angry and determined. She'd pushed me to the edge, and I was ready to fight back. I didn't want her to think she could just lie and cheat her way out of it and still keep her life comfortable. She crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she paid for it, one way or another. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to protect myself now. I had to rebuild, whether that meant walking away or confronting her head-on. Either way, I was done being the naive husband. It was time to take control of my life again. In the days that followed, I kept my distance from Lisa, but inside I was a mess. I fought with myself constantly. Part of me still wanted to believe she could somehow fix this, that maybe she was just caught up in some stupid flirtation, and another part just wanted to burn everything down. The truth was, I felt humiliated. For a long time, I'd trusted her with every part of myself, and now I had proof she'd been sneaking around with Mark. All the late-night lies, her bitchy attitude, her secretive behavior, it all made sense now. She'd always been so manipulative, so good at hiding her tracks. I knew I had to get some clarity. I reached out to a lawyer just to get advice about what my options were. I wasn't planning anything yet, but I wanted to be prepared. I also started thinking about what I wanted from all this, whether I'd try to save the marriage or just cut my losses and walk away. Honestly, I was leaning toward cutting ties. I couldn't see myself forgiving her after what I'd uncovered. Not after seeing her with Mark, not after realizing how much she'd been lying and betraying me. One night, I sat her down. I told her I needed answers, real ones, and that I wasn't going to accept any more bullshit excuses. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her I knew about her affair, about the hotel, about Mark. She looked furious, almost like she was about to explode. She tried to deny everything, but I pulled out my phone, showing her the footage again. Her bitchy, defensive attitude melted into silence. She stared at the screen, then back at me, and finally she muttered something about feeling trapped, about how she didn't mean for it to get this far. That was her excuse, the classic "I didn't mean for it to happen" bullshit. She said she was stressed, unhappy, and that Mark was just someone she'd been talking to for months. She claimed she still loved me, that she'd never wanted to hurt me. But I knew better. I knew her words were just her trying to manipulate me again, trying to make me feel guilty for catching her in her lies. I told her I didn't want to hear her excuses, that I'd heard enough. I told her I was done with the lies, done with her bitchy attitude, and that I was considering divorce. She looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to stand my ground so firmly. That moment was a turning point. I realized I'd been such a fool for so long, trusting her blindly. But now I was done. I wasn't going to be some doormat for her manipulation anymore. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, and I needed to reclaim my life. I made up my mind that I'd get out, no matter how much it hurt. I wasn't going to let her keep playing the victim, dragging me down with her lies. I deserved better, much better, and I was going to find it, even if it meant starting over completely. My emotional state was raw: anger, sadness, betrayal, everything crashing down all at once. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. I'd finally forced her to face the truth, and that was a step toward finally ending this nightmare. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew she'd try to manipulate me some more, call me insecure, accuse me of overreacting. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing her game. It was time to get serious about moving on, without her, and without the lies. All I could do now was prepare myself for the fallout and hope I was strong enough to get through it. In the days that followed, I took concrete steps. I contacted a lawyer and started the process of separating. I knew this was going to be messy. I wasn't naive enough to think it'd be simple or painless. But I also knew I couldn't live under the same roof with someone who had betrayed me so completely. The house felt cold and empty, even with her there. Every corner reminded me of how blind I'd been and how she'd lied to my face for months. Honestly, the biggest shock wasn't just her cheating. It was how effortlessly she dismissed my feelings, how she kept lying even when confronted with undeniable proof. I realized that I'd been giving her the benefit of the doubt for too long. Her bitchy attitude, her manipulations, all her lies, they'd been a mask hiding her true nature. Now I saw her for what she was, someone selfish, dishonest, and completely unfaithful. The way she tried to guilt-trip me, to twist her betrayal into some kind of victimhood, only cemented my decision to move on. I knew I deserved better. I deserved honesty, respect, and someone who wouldn't betray me behind my back. Emotional toll was heavy. I felt a mix of relief, anger, and sadness all at once. It was like mourning the end of a life I'd built around a lie. But I also felt stronger, like I'd finally taken back some control over my own life. I'd been a fool for so long, but I refused to let her win by breaking me completely. I decided I was better off without her, that I'd rebuild from the ruins of this betrayal. Now, I'm in the process of healing. It's not easy, and there are days when I still wake up feeling like I've been punched in the gut. But I know I did the right thing. I learned that trust is fragile, and that sometimes the person you love the most can turn out to be the biggest liar. I've come to accept that I can't fix what's broken, only move forward. I'm taking my time, focusing on myself, and trying to let go of the anger and heartbreak. Looking back, I can honestly say I've learned a lot about trust, about manipulation, and about what I truly deserve. I hope my story serves as a warning. Don't ignore the signs, do. Be afraid to dig deeper, and never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Love is built on honesty, and once that's gone, everything else falls apart. I may have lost my wife, but I've gained clarity and strength. And that, in the end, is worth more than any apology or excuse she ever could have given me.